Welcome to today's show. Joe Wright from CitySprint is going to tell us all about the realities of a legacy migration project. They're big, they're messy, and I think the key takeaway from our conversation and the thing that I get such a buzz out of is that data is people and data. You can't just do the technology. So let's get into it. Hi,
All right.
Joe.
Hi,
Welcome to the
Aaron.
podcast.
Thank you. Good to be
So
here.
we've worked together for a while now. This is a great opportunity to talk about what we've been doing and your vision at CitySprint. But maybe a good idea if you just start with who on earth are CitySprint? What do they do?
Sure. Yeah, CitySprint are one of the largest same-day courier providers in the UK. Very strong footprint in and around London, which is where they started. But operate across the whole of the UK, have a UK-wide network. Same-day logistics is literally predominantly picking up parcels from one location and taking it straight to another location. So we've got a fleet of couriers who use all manner of transport around London. They use a lot of bikes, for example, because you can move around London quite quickly on a bicycle. And they differ to sort of a hub and spoke operation in some works, but they will literally take a parcel from one place to another from A to B rather than taking it back to a hub, handling it, trunking it somewhere else, and then delivering it the final mile. But we do.
Yeah. And it strikes me they're quite a cool company, actually. You did a bike ride all over the UK last year from depot to depot kind of thing, didn't you?
We did, yeah. There was quite a team of us involved in the end. So we took one of our cargo bikes, which is a push bike, an e-bike with an extended front fork, if you like, for carrying parcels. They're heavy, I found out. And we basically took that bike right around the entire network, as you say, from site to site, right up from Perth, I think. There's Aberdeen, at least in Scotland, right down to southwest.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
there's a team of people that took it in turns to take the bike a little way of the journey, and we had support riders all the way along as well. So some people would be on the cargo bike and some would be on another bike. But yeah, it was a brilliant experience.
So as much as I love bikes, this show is not meant to be about bikes. It's probably meant to be a good time to get to the data and the people involved. What does it look like inside CitySprint? How does the company interact with data? What do they expect of you? What does the kind of operation look like? I suppose would help people understand, give them a little bit of context.
So the operation is the business is structured to be almost run locally, operationally. So each site is responsible for organising its own workload. They're all hooked up centrally to a management system, as you might expect. We then take the data from that management system and make it available for analytics in my function, in the BI function. So we're servicing the sales team, we're servicing the operations team, so we are able to play back to them their performance stats, and we service the management team as well by providing analysis. So because we're custodians of a lot of data coming out of that system and other supporting systems like the CRM, we have access to a lot of data in one place, and we can therefore hang it together and run an analysis as an.
Yeah. And of course, being a modern, fun, growing company, that management system is like super modern and like just brand new, isn't it? It's like, it's the latest piece of software.
Sure, yeah. If you mean newest by 12, 13, 14 years old, still green screen terminal. But the company is doing a lot to modernise that. So it's the same story, isn't it? Why fix it if it ain't broken? So the main management system has been in place for a long time, but it works, and it works really, really well. It's quite heavily customized for what the operation needs, and we have the opportunity to continue customizing it as the business evolves. So there is a school of thought that says, as I say, if it ain't broke, why fix it? However, we've sort of recognised that to remain competitive as everybody else moves to the cloud and brings the latest architecture and new innovations in IT in. We definitely don't want to fall behind that curve.
Yeah.
So there's a big IT project to modernise the whole system
Yeah.
at the moment.
And I suppose that the question was tongue in cheek, of course, but I think this is really, important, reality for everyone listening. It's an old system. It's been there a long time. It's got a lot of history embedded in it, and the data that we deal with, and we're working on a project together as part of that modernization. It's it's difficult. It's got a lot of things that has just built up over time, and the amount of things that we're bringing together. That's the reality for everyone else. There's just a lot of legacy and technical debt that builds up over time. Maybe interesting to tell everyone about the project from our perspective. So obviously we're working together, replacing some of the data legacy with Matatika. Why did you spot that was necessary? What was life like kind of sort of before?
Sure. Okay. So we have, as I said, been pulling data out of these systems, and we've also, as a BI function, because of our position in the business, we are able to bridge gaps where the systems had them, which I don't think is uncommon, because it's oftentimes easier to write something in your data warehouse to bridge a gap in logic than it is to develop a system to meet that need. So over time, there's sort of some, as you say, some legacy technical debt built up, both in terms of working with the restrictions of the system and building business logic to meet the needs of the business as it's evolved over time more quickly than the software has.
Mm-hmm.
What that led to is a kind of I call it a house of cards of a data platform, because we've had, as you can imagine, and I'm sure this is the same for a lot of people. People come and go; they all have their own way of doing things. So what we've ended up with is a sort of sedimentary BI stack where there's some logic and then someone's added a bit of logic on top and so on and so forth. And over time, that becomes quite complicated to manage. The opportunity that was spotted with working with you guys was to take all of that history, all that legacy, actually work out what's really relevant for the business today, because a lot of it is just noise that's accumulated over time, and to create a much more streamlined BI stack with just the logic that's relevant in as few steps as possible to deliver what the business needs today. But on top of that, to build in the maturity around that stack that prevents us sort of having the same problem build up again in the future.
Yeah, and I think probably another common problem that I guess people are dealing with certainly in a similar situation to ours, this legacy infrastructure, this legacy stack is working to some extent from the outside world. So the management team, the operations teams, they ask you for data and they ask you to do some analysis, and they get an answer. So from their point of view, it's kind of working. Whereas the reality on the other side, for you and your team, it's hard, like it's really difficult, and it's becoming increasingly difficult. Was part of what we observed when we started the project. So I think one of the things I saw us doing for the business was bringing a obviously infrastructure cleanup, kind of a better system to work on, and therefore people free up their time, they then become more effective. How, from your point of view, how do you go about communicating the benefits of that to the business? Because from their point of view, it was working, and then there's this project to make it better. How do they see the benefits? How do you think they might see the benefits in a project of this scale?
You have to find something, a tangible benefit that they can latch onto, is my experience. So just rebuilding the platform with the same outputs is a tough sell, because it might make my life easier, but that's not the aim of my job, to make my life easier. It is so long as it supports the business. But just for the sake of it, it's not. to get buy-in from stakeholders in the business, they have to have a tangible benefit. And for us, one of the tangible benefits was moving towards one version of the truth. So one of the challenges that we've always struggled with in BI is being able to deliver a set of numbers that is always the same no matter which report you look at it in. And because there's all these legacy logic in the stack, it tends to generate forks in that data where there's one view written for one set of people and a slightly different view with slightly different requirements written for another set, and all of a sudden they're looking at reports and when they compare they don't match. You know? So it's the story as old as time, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the one that damages the data relationship the most. Like,
It undermines the credibility entirely,
they
doesn't
assume
it?
the whole thing's wrong. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. They look at one number and the number doesn't match, and then all of a sudden the whole of it's wrong. It's often not the case. And it's often not actually a particularly big issue that drove the difference in a number. 99%. It's the devil's in the detail. You can get to 99% relatively easy, and then getting it that last 1% is always the hardest part, isn't it? So that was one of the benefits. The other one was a fundamental change in our ability to report in smaller time windows, which is a real boost in selling it, because that's a business requirement. And actually, in order to deliver that business requirement, we can argue very legitimately that we need to overhaul the way it works and review and redesign some of the logic in it.
And I recall we talked a lot with some of the stakeholders about the kind of house of cards or the spaghetti or the stack and what it was. And some listeners will be technical people. So what are the kinds of technologies that CitySprint had as legacy? And I'd even go sort of a bit further back in time to when we first started, because there was, my recollection, 2 BI visualization tools, multiple ETL type tools involved. It already consolidated on Snowflake as a step forward. So maybe just give everyone a little overview of what is this tech stack, or was the tech stack?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been quite a journey, really, even to where we are. So when I joined the business, we had, as you say, we had Snowflake in play, but we also had an on-prem SQL Server 2012, I think, or Windows 2012 running SQL Server 2008 or something like that. And so, as you can imagine, that created a whole host of challenges to try and keep the two data warehouses in sync. And actually, they weren't in sync because they received data on different schedules from our main system. So there was a window of about 2 hours a day when they'd actually match, and then they'd be out of sync. One of those data warehouses was funding ClickView at one point. The other one was funding and SSRS, and the other one was funding Looker. So you've then got multiples of variations in each of those systems, not to mention the two systems are fundamentally running on different data anyway. So during my tenure here, we've shut down the SQL Server, which was more complicated than it would perhaps sound, because the way it had been structured was that we were receiving data from our management system into the SQL Server and then replicating it onto Snowflake. So you were then dependent on the SQL Server to process as part of the pipeline for Snowflake.
Yeah.
So you had to rewrite the whole process for getting the data out of the system, out of the management system into Snowflake. We wound up Click as part of that. We wound up SSRS as part of that. And we migrated from Looker to Power BI because basically Looker was a little bit left field for us. The business tends to run most of its services through Microsoft. And then almost randomly, but certainly from a strategic point of view, it would appear random that you had Looker, which is obviously a Google company, providing our visual platform. So yeah, we moved to Power BI, and now we're, with your help, you're rewriting the whole stack, consolidating everything using Snowflake and Power BI to deliver it.
And of course, we're in the process of replacing Matillion and building DBT models and adding tests and data quality reporting and a whole ton of awesome stuff. So you can see a nice, clean infrastructure to build on. And probably one of the things we talk about is that's then able to power AI and new things. Is there any excitement about AI in the business and what the potential might be? It seems to come up all the time, almost everywhere. I don't want
AI is the
what the
buzzword everywhere,
CitySprint
isn't it? Yeah.
perspective is.
Probably the biggest marketing phrase of the last 2 or 3 years, isn't it? Everything's got AI in it now. There is excitement in the business, yeah. Aside from what we're doing in BI, IT are using AI to improve the courier onboarding process, for example. So they're using image recognition models to validate driving licenses, so that we don't have to go through the manual checks of driving license, that kind of stuff. But from our side, we're quite keen to support our customer service functions by using AI to model sentiment from customer transactions, so cases and calls, that sort of thing. Because now
Are you
technology
expecting that
allows
to land in the BI team? Are you expecting that to come down to your scope of work when that analysis is required, or is that elsewhere?
ultimately, I think it should fall under BI.
Yeah.
And it's my vision to have it included under BI. Organization within the organization, there's been a slightly fractured approach to some of the data processes. So BI have been central around the central management systems data, but the CRM was implemented by the former commercial director, and that was sort of her baby. So she would look after. She looked after the commercials, the sales team, the customer services team, had Salesforce to support all of that. And as such, it was a little bit out of our scope. But actually, because we've got feeds into Salesforce where a lot of that data is captured, the customer service and customer sentiment type data, that's captured in there. We have feeds into it. It makes a lot of sense to bring that data into Snowflake alongside the management system data. So that you can look for trends between not just customer sentiment, but the jobs that they're doing.
Yeah.
And it is really exciting. It gets me excited because I love the idea that you've got this massive knowledge base waiting to be tapped.
Yeah.
Which I think perhaps a lot of businesses struggle. They've got data. I think most businesses got more data than they know what to do with. And because it's not organized and available in a really accessible way, they never get to it.
Yeah. And the CRM has actually become the customer master now, effectively. And that's sort of an important concept of where the business looks after, who the customer is and what's then attached to them. So that is all then possible. I do think that probably AI is overhyped in data, but there will be some rewards. All this kind of work that we're talking about now is a prerequisite, though. We won't get to that promised land, AI and data and the business benefits, until you have it clean and organized and actually usable. So I'm very excited about this project, doing that for CitySprint and others.
Can I just check there on AI? My experience of using the likes of ChatGPT is that actually it's a very, very useful personal assistant tool rather than, and I suspect this is how it will probably take hold, is rather than businesses standing back and saying, oh, this is our AI strategy, we're going to use ChatGPT here to do this function, or we're going to use machine learning to do this. Actually, I think the likes of ChatGPT and similar platforms, generative AI, individual users will start to adopt it as a go-to for all sorts of things. So I use it daily to support with DAX coding, for example, in Power BI, or even comparing. I used it the other day to compare two scripts that I've written, just to see whether or not there was any difference between them, and it very instantly, in fact, told me that there's one change, which is the one change I was expecting. So that was great.
Yeah.
But when someone sends you a table of data that was produced in Excel, but it's just an image, if you want to do anything with that data in the old school where you just have to type out the numbers, but now you can load it onto Power BI and it will turn it into a data table for you.
I think I agree. It's an accelerator for individuals' work. It might make, let's say, the extreme, it might make an individual 10 times more productive if they're using it effectively and it's integrated into their work. it's probably not the like global panacea for replace a whole bunch of things. It's do everything slightly better or incrementally better.
So integration into business will probably be more of an organic process rather than a strategic step,
Yeah,
where actually 30% of the workforce are now regularly using this platform, and since they're all using it and it's collecting data about how they use it,
yeah,
if you're on the right tier, so you've got data privacy, because obviously that's a big concern with these sort of systems, but if you're by the right enterprise level, they promise to keep everything private. But presumably that means that the interactions you have within a business can be shared with other individuals in that business, and that could become quite powerful. Not to mention, so from that productivity point of view, but also from a tactical point of view for the business.
yeah,
I think that's how it will grow.
yeah. And then, so obviously that's quite future facing. What else is on the horizon for you and CitySprint? Anything at all? It's an open question. What's on the horizon?
Well, so CitySprint, I'm actually in the process of handing over to a successor at CitySprint. So it's exciting times for the BI team there because they've got new management coming in. I mean, CitySprint itself has had a new exec management team come in at the beginning of the year. So actually, there's a lot of change happening in the business at the moment, as is the nature of when you change senior management. So there's a lot of challenges for BI in that respect because as you're well aware, the requirements of the project have been sort of pressure tested with a new view from the new management team, and they naturally want new reports. They want to look at things in ways that we perhaps haven't looked at things before. So that creates a lot of activity. But that's exciting because otherwise you just get stuck doing the same thing, right? So whenever that kind of thing happens, I see that as an opportunity to rethink and get out of your own way almost and look at things with a fresh set of eyes, which is often people get institutionalized into what they do and they just do it because that's what they've been doing. So
and it's probably good advice for anyone, isn't it? Like anyone in any role is over time getting refreshed in some way. And I wonder what advice you'd have to anyone finding themselves in that position where their role's changing or the company's changing, or what would be your words of wisdom for what they should do in that situation?
the company's changing, embrace it. Just embrace the change, always. And keep an open mind. I think it's very easy for people to feel threatened when someone comes along and challenges what they do. Their immediate, well, very, very often the immediate response is that it's an attack on their ability.
Yeah.
When someone asks why they do what they do.
Whereas it's just change, right? Like just change is a little bit scary and change happens, and it's in fact I kind of laugh that change is the only constant. Yeah, everything's always changing. So I think I like that. Embrace
I heard a brilliant quote, which I'm now kicking myself. I can't remember who the quote is from, but I'll have to look that up. But the quote was, "Changing your mind is the best way to prove that you still have one."
I love it.
And I thought that was a brilliant quote. But change is great. Yeah, it's really important. Businesses, especially in this, trading environment, the world's changing so fast now. Especially in technology, 6 months and things are all hat. So you've got to be prepared to change because you just get left behind. And that's true at every level. That's from a business strategic point of view about what they're trying to achieve, the products they offer, the services they offer, but actually down to an individual person because people don't stay in the same job very long anymore, not like they used to. I mean, actually, in CitySprint, we're a bit unusual that we've got people. I've got someone in my team that's been in the company in one form or another for 30 odd years. And that's not common anymore. I think the average is 2 or 3 years and then people move on, which means there's always going to be someone else coming along who's hungry to make their mark.
Make a difference,
Make a difference, exactly. And if you're not prepared to embrace change, you're just going to, you can either ride it or you're just being swept along by it. And that means you're not in control. You're letting someone else control your life and your career. You need to get out in front and take the bull by the horns.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think for anyone, I've heard people say things like, it may help, from their perspective, helps them other people not feel alone, or it helps them deal with that change, or so I think sharing that advice of embrace it, and this is perfectly normal is ideal. That is what I would hope to get out of this podcast for anyone listening. So
Good. Yeah, it is important, isn't it, to have. Do you know, I think it's very easy to feel, as you say, I think it's quite easy to feel alone when you do data work, because you don't. It's important to have relationships with people. Clearly, you do need to be able to communicate with people. So the importance of stakeholder relationships, because without those, trying to sell anything around data to people who don't live and breathe data is hard enough as it is.
Let's dive into that. So, you just mentioned the importance of building stakeholder relationships and how that affects data. What does that look like from your perspective? How do you go about talking to people and getting that relationship built so that you can make a difference?
I think being patient and respectful of everybody's point of view is really important. So my assessment of the world of data and how it fits into businesses, there are two camps. There's at one end of the scale, you've got very, very technical people who are not stereotypically perhaps a bit introverted. They like being in their own space. They like their relationship with a computer because it doesn't have an opinion, and it just does as it's told, and it's very logical, and they can work at within their own framework, within their own mental framework with a computer. And then at the other end of the scale, you've got business managers who very often do not care about how the data came to be. It's the information the data unlocks that they're interested in. They don't, they don't need to know whether or not there's SQL code or a DAX query or whatever. They're not interested.
Exactly.
And there's not many times where those two camps overlap. And so there's a bit of a gulf between them. And that will be an area where people struggle, because you've got business managers with their high level vision of what is required for the business so they can run it more effectively. And they've got to somehow translate that to people who really don't care how the business runs or what the information the data unlocks is. They're interested about how the data came to be and where it came from and what the transformations were and so on.
Yeah.
So sitting, in my opinion, my career is built on the idea that I can sit somewhere in the middle. And I think that's true of probably most data managers, that they can have the high level conversation and see the business perspective, but they can also get into the weeds of the detail and understand the technical piece. So if they can't actually do the coding necessarily, but they know enough about it to ask the right questions and have the right dialogue with their technical people, and be respectful of both points of view.
Yeah,
neither one is more important than the other. They're both, you need both to make it all work.
Yeah, and I've heard that lots and lots of times, lots of different industries. I think that is the vital piece, that the successful people, and telling the story of their success, are straddling the two camps that don't necessarily talk to each other very well. And in this context, business and data and being able to straddle both is key, and that's the sort of secret sauce, if there is one.
I agree, and actually, that's a real recipe for success, I think, isn't it? Because you wouldn't want great if everyone could do everything, but you probably would have a diluted skill set at each end of the scale if everyone can do everything. You want some people who can really get into the weeds of the detail, of the technical stuff.
Specialist.
And you need people who can gloss over that because they've got other decisions about the future of the company to make, and they're going to spend their time building relationships with suppliers and vendors and customers. They haven't got the
building
time.
Relationships in different needs of the company. Yeah,
exactly. So that's the essence of a team, isn't it? It's different strengths and coming together and making it all work as a well-oiled machine. That's a company, actually.
That's it.
That is exactly what a company is.
So we were just chatting there about how the infrastructure work makes a difference to the company, or an invisible difference to the company. Making that more tangible for the technical folks. What's that look like? What does kind of good look like in a new world, modern modern stack, modern software, modern technology? What's the state of the art?
I think the measure of success here is that we move away from investigating challenges and issues within the data. We move the conversation in the meetings away from, oh, my number looks different to your number. Why is this number the number it is? And we get to a point where everybody just trusts the number to be correct and therefore goes into the business to find out why it is what it is. So
Yeah.
if there's a data point that they're not comfortable with or falls out of acceptable parameters, the first question they ask is what happened in the real world, rather than is this right?
Yeah. I recall in our work together at one point, you were pretty excited about the kind of reporting we do around what's statistically normal, the kind of test reporting, that kind of test-driven development and reporting around the data was just something not seen before. Like, so we're doing something quite innovative there.
You were absolutely right. I have worked. So my route into CitySprint was as part of a business management consultant team. So I did the data support for them. So we come into a business, we kick the tires on whatever the business wanted us to look at, and I would support them by gathering data and helping them present it back. Therefore, I've had the privilege of working in a number of different businesses in a number of different sectors, and I can honestly say in none of them was there anything that tested the quality or consistency of the data itself. So I've seen platforms that will test whether or not a job runs, a pipeline
Kind of
runs,
alerting
and it
level
will
type
alert
stuff.
you if it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I've never seen one that says, actually, it ran, but we didn't get as many jobs through, or we didn't get as many records through as we normally do, or a series of values in a column fall outside an acceptable range. Never seen it. And for me, that's a real game changer in terms of data quality, because it enables us to get out in front of the curve. And instead of waiting for some end user to receive a report that's not showing half of the data it's supposed to be showing, we'll get an alert before it ever goes to them, which just moves the needle massively in terms of credibility, efficiency, and it gets, hopefully, when those challenges start to die down, because we're on it, proactively looking into all these issues and then keeping a knowledge base of what went wrong and tidying it. We've got version control on our scripts so that we don't implement something that then causes another knock-on effect, which is also another common
just
challenge.
Awareness of the change.
Correct. Yeah. So when you take all of that out, the data becomes more robust, it's more validated, people trust it more, and actually the role of the BI team, certainly in CitySprint, which the BI team in CitySprint is quite a wide scope. So I know in other businesses, BI is quite a narrow scope in so much that they take data provided from IT and they analyze it or write reports on it, but that's it. They don't get involved in the architecture. Whereas in CitySprint, we do everything from out of the back of the system, the management system, right through to writing the reports and managing the platforms on which they run. So as a result, my team spends quite a lot of time investigating problems, trying to architect data to meet a business need, test it, user acceptance test it. And actually, what we'd like to be able to do is get to a point where we have a really robust development pipeline for our data, therefore a really robust live production environment with the right procedures around it so that nothing gets changed unless it's promoted correctly through user acceptance testing correctly. And they then start to spend more of their time business partnering and actually getting away from the relationship just them and the keyboard, but talking to people and understanding how the business that they produce fits into the context of the real world in the business and why it's meaningful and what it means to the stakeholders, which
and I think
isn't for everyone. I appreciate that.
That's right.
To my mind, that's the juicy part of the work.
And I think that to me is going to be the gift that keeps on giving from our project together, is that once we've got that change promotion with Manatika in place, we've got the testing, we've got the data quality reporting. The data team can then build those business relationships and maintain the trust, because, like you said, they will be going to them with potential issues or identifying them before they hit the user. And it kind of strikes me that one of the biggest things that we're having to deal with actually is that we've got the software, we've got the technologies, we've got the new way, but there's a process change to the team that needs to happen. They need to get used to the idea of looking at the data quality each day, thinking that that's actually part of their role, is to care about this will affect the report. We better talk to that group of users, and that's the kind of the change that always takes a little bit longer, is getting people used to the new way. That's hard. We get the technology in place, but still got to change the people.
You're quite right. Yeah, data and technology is half of the data story, actually, isn't it? In any business. To draw on your point, is you can't. So again, my experience of coming into businesses fresh and trying to understand what's going on is you gather the data, and that will give you a pattern. But unless you talk to people and get the anecdotal side of it, that you don't get the context around the data. So you've got to have the conversation, the relationship with people, the stories behind what's going on in the real world, and then you quantify what they think anecdotally is happening with the actual data and the technology.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. It is definitely an underrated and highly important aspect of data management is not the data, it's the people management, right?
I love that. It's data and people. I mean,
it is. It really is. We've done some KPI projects in the past. I've done a couple of KPI projects where you go into a business and look at what's going on, and the broad process for a KPI project, the way I run it, is interviewing people around the business to identify what the key measures are, what actually are the leverage points within the system. How do you measure those leverage points? And then you build the platform, you design the measures, you build a report that plays them back. But the bit that often gets missed is, but then what are you actually going to do with that? What's the business management process that comes out of the back of those KPIs?
Who looks at the KPI? Who gets incentivized on it? Who cares about it?
Yeah, exactly that. What are you going to do when they're not in the threshold they're supposed to be? And then the last step that people often overlook is, how are you going to make sure that those KPIs remain current?
Sorry, that's inconvenienced these. Thank you.
We'll cut that out.
That's 5 minutes building up.
Yeah, but how do you make sure those KPIs remain current? Because oftentimes you find that KPI packs get longer and longer and longer, and as they get longer, the relevance of them diminishes to a point.
And then it becomes that information overload. Like if you're measuring absolutely everything, what matters? And so sort of zooming back to the data team and their project and their kind of ways of working. So we've introduced new technology that is game changing and fundamentally better and freeing up their time. Their focus, therefore, is shifting to something else. So they're having to get used to where that new focus is, and that's sort of always with people, softly, sort of gently, going towards a new process. In my view, obviously you could take different approaches. You could, be kind of sledgehammer about it, but you won't necessarily get a positive result. So, I think that's another thing to think about with a project like this in general, is that if you're making big change, expect the people side to take a little while.
Data is it's sort of the nervous system of a business, isn't it? And consequently, it not only is a tool for understanding what's happening in the world of the business, or anything for that matter, but it's also a tool for shaping behavior and culture in a business.
Exactly.
And I think it's very easy for people to see it as a tool for reporting and less so for a tool for driving change in culture.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's really a really good point of view, actually. Yeah, because once you hear it kind of all the time. Once you start to track a number, that's when you start to infect a change. That's
Yeah.
that's the sort of nature of it. So I guess the message there might be careful about what you're tracking, and that's like when you're looking at a big list of KPIs, choose wisely.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it doesn't matter what KPI you choose; it'll have an impact on the behaviour of the person being monitored by it, and they will respond accordingly, whether or not that's the way you expected them to respond or not. So designing KPIs is probably as much an art form as it is a science.
Yeah, I'd agree. Have you heard that story about the factory where they adjusted the lights, so created a brighter or dimmer atmosphere? And so when they adjusted it to a brighter lighting situation, the productivity output increased. Then when they adjusted it to a dimmer lighting situation, the productivity also increased. So it's just like the actual act of observing was increasing productivity, not the lights.
Not the condition.
It's classic. Yeah, well, thanks, Joe. That has been a great conversation.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks for having me.